Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Patriot Show. I'm your host, Anthony Stephen Malone. Got a very special guest today on the show, Moreno, author, Vietnam combat veteran, and former LAPD officer. This is the first of a two-part series of interviews that are very special. Hello, Al. How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful, and thank you so very much for having me on your show.
Al, thank you so much for coming on. It's an absolute honor to have someone of your caliber on the show. I think my viewers will find you both interesting and educational as well. A lot of my viewers will know who you are across the United States, but some of my viewers in the UK and Europe might not know that much about you. Can you give us a little bit of detail about your background, where you grew up, that sort of thing?
Well, I come from a really large family. There were 8 boys and 4 girls. We were principally raised in one of the suburbs of Los Angeles called Florence, but it was one of the more gang-infested areas of Los Angeles. By the way, Los Angeles County is recognized as the gang capital of the world.
Yeah.
The area that we were raised in was, like I said, was Florence, but it was in Spanish, it's called Florencia 13. And they got about 2,000 gang members. It's one of the smaller gangs, but certainly one of the more lethal gangs that goes back to the 30s. The home that we were raised in was under 800 square feet, believe it or not. And there were 3 bedrooms, a small little tiny restroom that when you opened the door, you actually hit the little toilet bowl. I mean, it was tiny. But obviously we managed somehow to, get through what we had to do. We all went to the same school that was just a couple blocks down. As Catholic school, St. Aloysius, all 12 of the Moreno children, the 8 boys and 4 girls. And in the first and second grade, I was not doing as well as everyone else with, the reading and writing and arithmetic. And I didn't have a clue what was going on. And it wasn't until many, many, many years, actually till 1973, when I decided to go to Swedish college, that I learned that I had 2 terrible learning disabilities. One was dyslexia and the other one is dyscalculia. Dyslexia has to do with the ability to read and understand letters, and dyscalculia is kind of the counterpart for math. So all through grade school, I was and high school, I was a DNF student, and it was because children can be, quite brutal at times to kids that are different. And then to add fire to the problems that I already had in the second grade, I was diagnosed with Legg-Calvé-Perthes, which has affected the left hip area. And the way it was treated by Children's Hospital in Los Angeles is that for 2 years, I was on crutches and a sling that actually held my left leg up, cocked at 90 degrees for 2 years. And then the next 2 years, I had a brace that went all the way from the top of the hip to past the foot, suspended the left foot. And then I had an elevator shoe on the right side. So it was from the 2nd to 6th grade. So it was, pretty challenging. When I left grade school, it was actually 8 years, but they held me back in the 6th grade. So it was actually 9 years there. Then I went on to high school, and I went to 3 high schools, Cathedral, Huntington Park, and Southgate High, but mostly I hung out with the kids from Bell. And again, I was a DNF student, and which, made it kind of tough. And then in the 12th grade, I just kind of I just had it. So like a few weeks before graduation, I just dropped out and just kind of drifted from job to job. And then in 1965, I was actually drafted to service. And I was rejected and classified 1Y. And this is kind of embarrassing, it's very, very sensitive, but I want to be completely out, forthright with everyone, is that I actually failed the written test. That was obviously because of the learning disabilities. And it was so humiliating that I lied to everyone and told them that I was rejected and classified as 1Y, because of my late Calvus Perthes, and everybody bought that hands down. So I continued to just, drift from job to job. And then I got arrested 3 separate times for some pretty serious crimes. And you're going to hear this all the time from anybody that gets arrested, is that I wasn't guilty. And it's pretty remarkable when I think about it. I was arrested for armed robbery. I was arrested for burglary, and I was arrested for ADW, which is the felony assault. And on the felony assault, it was this sweet girl that I knew. We were a bunch of kids at one of the hangouts on a Friday night, and there were a couple of kind of bad dudes, dopers, that were hassling this sweet girl that I knew in high school. And I just walked up to the 3 and I told them to stand down. And one of them came at me, and I went into him like a buzzsaw and put him in the hospital. So I got arrested for felony assault. And I went to I couldn't actually, they wanted to obviously, to plea the thing down to misdemeanor. But I knew that if I had a conviction for anything like that, that there's no way in hell that I ever get onto the Los Angeles Police Department. Yeah. So I decided to take a full-blown jury trial. And had I been found guilty, I'd have done 3 to 5 years in state prison. So it was really, really rolling the dice. The robbery arrest was truly a what my brothers would call a humbug. We were at a pool hall, me and Bell High School's fullback, and I'm not going to mention their names. And anyhow, three of my friends from 3 different high schools, and one of them, I can say his name now. He's passed. Danny Shelley was a little kind of loopy, and he used to have a shotgun. Always had a shotgun in the trunk of his car, but the damn thing didn't have a firing pin, so it was worthless. And so we were playing pool at Silver Q, and some kid ran into the pool hall and he said, "Hey man, there's somebody out there with a gun." Well, that was unheard of back then in Huntington Park, because it was kind of like American Graffiti on steroids. So Danny kind of got all pumped up and he goes, "Hey man, if they mess with me, I'm going to get it with my shotgun." And we're all looking at him like, "Danny, chill out. This is," and like I said, the shotgun didn't even have a firing pin. So he went out, got the shotgun from the back of his trunk, put it in the back seat of his car, drove the car directly in front of the Silver Q in the red zone. And obviously a call had gone out to the sheriff's department that there was a 415 man with a gun, a disturbance. So when they rolled up, of course, we didn't see this. They seen the shotgun in the back of the car and said, "Well, I guess this is the gun call," and waited for us to come out. When we came out, they just pounced on us with shotguns, put us on our face, hooked us up, and took us down to Firestone Substation. Now, that's Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department's most lethal area in all of Los Angeles. And it was 99% Afro-American back in the day. And it's a whole story, and I'm not going to get into the whole story, but I was in there for 3 days. So I know what it's like to actually go through the process, which gave me a very unique sort of experience and insight of the people that years later I would be arresting. And it was very valuable. It was a very valuable lesson. So the one thing that I left out, when I was first diagnosed at that wonderful hospital in Los Angeles, Children's Hospital in Los Angeles, Dr. Peterson, I remember his name, and this is 1954. After they x-rayed me and he ascertained what the problem was, I remember him picking me up. Now just picture, I was a little guy in the 2nd grade, And he puts me on the examining table and he just comes right up to my face and he goes, and what do you want to be, little man, when you grow up? And I just, in a very vociferous way, barked out, I want to be a policeman. The doctor just kind of bolted back, and is gone. And that's when I made my covenant, come hell or high water, to not only become a policeman, but to be a Los Angeles police officer. Then moving on, after the 3 arrests, by 1968, a lot of my buddies were going to Vietnam. A lot of them weren't coming back. And I said, I've got to try again. Well, I attempted to enlist into the Marine Corps. And I actually processed through. I was shocked. The Marines were losing so many that they were taking candidates that weren't the brightest thing on the block at the time, So anyhow, I went to boot camp in San Diego. We call it MCRD, which is a 12-week program. And then after that, we went on to Camp Pendleton in Southern California in San Diego County. And we went to ITR, BIT, Staging Battalion, where they teach you the fundamentals of jungle warfare. And at that time, we issued the M14 rifles, which is just a phenomenal rifle. Not those pissant M16s. None of the guys ever cared for them. So when we processed through, we got a couple of weeks R&R kind of, or leave, I guess you call it. And then we were flown to Da Nang, or actually first Okinawa for 11 days for staging battalion. Then we were flown into Da Nang. And there were, I guess, about 200 of us. And when we landed in Da Nang, it was just like the movie, Oliver Stone's movie Platoon. You get off this plane and you're in this bustling airport, Da Nang. And the heat is the first thing that just absolutely strikes you. It's just absolutely insanely hot. And you turn into a bead of sweat. And that's the way it is for your 13-month tour. That was the length of our tour in Vietnam for the Marines. So we were shuttled out to this wooden warehouse kind of thing. And then we were individually. And by the way, as I'm going, if you have any questions, whatever, just absolutely tell me to, just jump in. So I'm just fast forwarding on all this stuff, and I guess you can ask me questions on whatever you want after I give you this kind of overview. So we went into this big building, and that's where they issued everybody exactly where they were going to go, what units in Vietnam. The Marine Corps had 2 divisions there, about 12,000 apiece, and the Marines were up into the northern part of South Vietnam. Vietnam was cut in 1954 at the 17th parallel, which is just about half the length of the entire country, which is about the size of California. And so it was called the DMZ. And then they cut it into quadrants, I Corps, 2, 3, and 4 Corps. And the Marines were just up against North Vietnam, right in that particular area. But anyhow, so I was really concerned about losing my 2 best buddies, Eugene Hare and Chuck Lebowski. I mean, you get so really, as you're a warrior, so you know how close you can get to some of your brothers. And we went, we thought we were going to be separated, but we did go to the same battalion, 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines. And, but they went to Mike Company and I went to India Company, but we were still on the same location, Hill 10, what was out in the whoop-whoops. I mean, there was just like nothing. It was like National Geographic on steroids. It was just amazing. So I got to see Chuck and Rabbit every once in a while out in the field, sometimes on the battalion base camp, and certainly I've seen him a handful of times when we were in the Quay Sound Mountains for 33 days in the rainforest and jungles on Operation Oklahoma Hills. Excuse me, Oklahoma Hills. There's 3 short stories that I can share with you, because the next book that's coming out covers my experience in detail of my Vietnam experience, and then the unfathomable experience of trying to get onto the Los Angeles Police Department. It took me 5 years. I was disqualified 9 separate times. That's more than any other candidate going back to 1869, the genesis of the department, that ever was successful to process and win that many disqualifications. So I got on, I applied on September the 17th, 1970, and was hired on August the 4th, 1970, or August the 4th, 1975. But I'll give you 3 short stories about the Vietnam thing, and then I think you can basically ask him some questions if you'd like after. But the first day in Vietnam was just a harbinger of just exactly how insane combat, jungle warfare combat was. When 20 of us from the 200 guys were assigned to 3rd Battalion 7th Marines, so it's the same hill. You have 4 companies: Kilo, Lima, Mike, and India Company. So when we got, we took a Rough Rider, which is a truck convoy from Da Nang to Hill 10. And we were being processed as the new guys. And of course, they teach you like manure. It's just, that's the way it is. And it just happened to be kind of like noontime. So they said, well, listen, before we give you your 782 gear, which is your helmets, flak jackets, and everything else, and your weapons, go down to the chow hall over there, which was, like I said, another piece of wooden, it was a wooden building. And so we walked in, the 20 of us walked into the chow hall, and immediately just kind of like we were back in boot camp. We were shoulder to shoulder, shuffling left to right with these big trays, you know, and just scared out of our minds. And there was this one big cook that I got to know. His name is Zeke. I got to know him really well later on. But I guess the pathetic look that I had on my face of fright, and he just kind of felt sorry, and he gave me an extra scoop of that slop that they were serving that day, and I forget what it was. And I just kind of was stunned, and I could see that he was looking at me kind of like fatherly, like, oh, look at this poor unit, you know. So, so as I started to walk over to one of the benches there, I looked at the back wall. It was painted red with all kinds of Snoopy or Peanuts figures on it. And then in the chow hall, they had these rows and rows and rows of names in white ink of all the Marines that had been killed. And I thought it was a little strange to have that monument in the chow hall. Kind of unsettling. So just before I sat down, all of a sudden, it was like, have you ever been in a thunderstorm? I mean, something that is just, I mean, it just blows your ears out. And we're being hit with 122 and 140 millimeter rockets. 122 is about 6 foot long, and 140 is shorter and stubbier. And it was incoming. So it's very difficult to describe, but the impact and the sound, and you can hear the shrapnel as it's hitting hard objects. And everybody, that chow hall was emptied like in a nanosecond. And I was standing there by myself with holding that tray. Yeah. And I was just glued. Now everybody freaks out once or twice in Vietnam. And that was my first and only time. I swear I could not physically walk. I was just glued to the wooden floor. And at the whole time, just boom, crash, boom, slam. It's just, and then it just dawned on me, I better get the hell out of there or I'm gonna die. So I didn't just drop the tray. I threw the tray straight up into the air. I don't know why to this day why I did that. The slop went all over the place. Then I hit the door, and then I turned right. And I was a sprinter in high school, and I know that I probably set the world's record in flying down there looking for a bunker or a spider hole or whatever the hell to jump into. And the whole time, here's these explosions going off all around me. And then, like I said, yeah, I better get in some bunker or hole or whatever, fighting hole. And there was this one smaller, compact fighting hole. And I went into it like a heat-seeking missile, head first. And there were 3 Marines just shoulder to shoulder, 3 on one side and then 3 on the other, and their knees almost hitting. It was such a small hole. And I went in there and smashed all the 6 of them. And they weren't too pleased about that. I was in my civilian olive drab uniform, so they knew that I was a brand new guy. And I looked at them, and they looked like the face of war. And they were my age or younger, but they looked like men, kind of men that you would see in a Second World War movie. And you just, they got that 1,000-yard stare. So I somehow squeezed myself in between one group on one side. And meantime, the shelling is still coming in. And then I had this strange thought, well, what if the next round hits over on this side where I'm at? So I unwedged myself, and then I wedged myself in between the other guys, which is just a couple of feet in front, and I just squeezed in there. Then I had that same thought, well, what if a round hits over here? So I did it again, and one of them looks over at me, and he goes, I can't use the language. He says, if you do that again, if the art doesn't kill you, I'm going to kill you. So I said, okay. So finally, the incoming stopped, and we squeezed ourselves through that hole. And then I seen this ghastly sight. And we'd been in Vietnam, I don't think, over maybe 5 or 6 hours. 2 of the 20 guys that went with us were killed. They went into a 2-man fighting hole. And I was told later that they stood up to see where the rounds were hitting, and one hit right in front of them. One of the kids got his head completely blown off the top of it. Just, there was nothing there. And the other one got daylight blown through him with shrapnel. And I remember a mule, which is a little utility vehicle. It's a little flatbed with a little lawnmower engine on it. They used it to move gear back and forth on the hill and what have you. And I remember a few Marines bloody, burnt bodies and on the mule. And then they drove them off to, I guess it's kind of like a morgue or whatever. And I remember their boots flopping up and down like this here. And I had a concern. I said, because they didn't try to, belt them down or whatever. And I go, Jesus, what if they, what if they fall off or whatever? I mean, they were dead. So then it just got as kind of grisly. We were then told to go over to the armory to get our 782 gear and M16s, machine guns, or M79s, whatever your MOS was, whatever your job was. But we were waiting for our helmets, our flak jackets, and web belts and canteens. And so they go, well, we'll have something here for you here in a minute. And here comes this mule. We could see it coming down, way down the line. And there's a mountain of gear on it. And when it got within, I guess, maybe 15 or 20 feet of us, we recognized what it was. And as God is my witness, it was 782 gear, helmets, flak jackets, webbing, etc., that they took from recently killed Marines and severely injured. And it hadn't been cleaned. There were still gaping holes. There was bone fragment, hair, tissue, blood, and we were just stunned. And this corporal went up and unceremoniously kicked that big mountain of stuff over. And he says, get the stuff there. We'll get you some newer gear in a few days. And we were just like, we didn't want to touch it. And then all of a sudden, we ran at it, and we actually fought over the gear that had the smaller hose or the less tissue that we were told to go wash it off over this little hose. And by the way, I was issued an M16, we had trained with M14s because they had just made the change. And I was issued all of one 20-round magazine. That's all they had. Throughout the war, the Marine Corps' budget was the least of all the other services. And we had the old Korean type flak jackets. The Army had the really nice new ones. We had Korean helmets, always short on absolutely everything, personnel and equipment. So when I got home, the transition to, which was like one of the things that you had asked about, how did I transition? And it was everything that you'd see on TV, the mass demonstrations, people running around with North Vietnamese flags. And you being a warrior and with your background, I'm sure that you can viscerally understand just how shocking, what kind of a betrayal, and not to mention how emotionally angry that you got at this lot. Yeah. They were pissing on the flag, stomping it, burning it. And we had just come back from watching our buddies getting all blown to hell, fighting for our country. And that was kind of part of well, that was exactly the way it was back in the day. So I applied for the Los Angeles Police Department in September of 1970. It's my life's dream. And initially, everything was going really, really well. And then I started getting a series of disqualifications for medical reasons. And these medical reasons or medical anomalies, they were non-existent. So I would have to go to a specialist, a back specialist, a knee specialist. And I fought the city of Los Angeles for 5 years before finally, Mayor Tom Bradley at the time, I wrote him, and he got like postal, he was an Afro-American, and he got like postal mad, and he had done his own investigation, and then that's how I actually finally got on to the Los Angeles Police Department. During the time that I was appealing to get on, everybody that was get on to the LAPD at that time had some college, believe it or not. Some of the guys had degrees. So they were really picking the creme de la creme at that time. And everything, all 7 tests are pass or fail, with the exception of the oral test. The oral test is the ones with the highest oral score are the ones that get hired first. And if you didn't get hired within a year, then you have to reprocess all over again. So I ended up taking all 7 tests 3 separate times. But I decided I'm going to have to go to college. So I went to Cerritos Junior College, and I wanted to, obviously it took administration of justice. And my reading level back then, probably maybe 4th or 5th grade. And I was just blessed as I was applying to get on that this sweet English teacher, when I told her, I was almost in tears about how I couldn't read or do my numbers. And she gave me a couple of tests because she just so happened to be doing a test on learning disabilities. Because back in the Stone Age, nobody had a clue. And she looked up at me and she goes, you know, Al, you've got a really severe case of dyslexia and dyscalculia. And I couldn't even pronounce the names back then. but she gave me some concepts on how to read and how to try to cipher the numbers out. And it was really very difficult, but I did it. And then I told her that as she was planning my 2-year curriculum, that I wanted to do it in 1.5 years. And she looked at me kind of astonished. She goes, Al, even kids that have gone through high school and were straight A students, they would find it problematic to do a 2-year curriculum in 1.5 years. And I told her, yeah, but they're not combat United States Marines. So she just kind of, liked that. And she goes, well, I've never done this before. Make a long story short, I graduated in 18 months and made the Alpha Gamma Honor Society. Everything that I read, I remembered. And although I read like molasses still, and I still have those, you don't get cured, but you figure certain ways how to manipulate the words and numbers and what have you. And that's pretty well an overview of my background up until the time I got onto the LAPD.
Indeed. I was like to say, being a fellow combat veteran who is dyslexic as well, everyone said it was impossible for me to write a book. I've done 4 of them. So it takes us a while to get there, but we get there. Now, I just want to take you back a little bit. Thank you as well for sharing some of your memories about Vietnam. You're a very humble person, and obviously I'm aware of a lot more that you've done, but we're not going to go into detail in that on the interview. Your book that will come out about Vietnam, that is going to be something very special. Okay, but the viewers will know a little more, will get told a lot more about that in the near future when your book is officially released. I will say, we're not going to talk about it, but I will tell my viewers that you received a commendation in Vietnam, and you saw and you did a lot over there. So you have our respect, and I would like to say on behalf of all of veterans out there and people across the UK and America, thank you for your service. Okay.
Well, coming from you, I get the full impact of the sincerity of your words. However, when the Vietnam era veterans hear that by someone, it's kind of a popular thing to say. We actually we don't see the sort of true visceral understanding and thanks. It's just kind of a cool thing to say.
Yeah.
And a lot of us don't, we just kind of like blow it off. But when we hear that from someone with your background, that's large. And thank you so much for that.
Yeah. A lot of people, this is my opinion, it's not out like everyone's opinion. A lot of the Vietnam veterans were treated disgracefully when they returned to the United Kingdom, to America. That's my opinion. A lot of people argue either way on that one, but any veteran from any war returning should be shown respect. Doesn't matter who you are. If you picked up a rifle, you've done a uniform, and you went into combat, respect is there, because not everyone has got the guts or the balls to get up there. Brothers and sisters in arms, that's what a lot of people are. Okay, so for me, being a combat veteran, well, it's right to say, and this is again, thank you for your service. Only veterans would understand really what that means. It is words, but once you've been in war, which is, let's just say what it is, it ain't glamorous, it's hell. It's the closest thing to hell anyone's ever going to say. And I do hope that most of my viewers will never have to see anything like what we have, Al, especially you in Vietnam. Okay, so we're going to put that little bit behind us on the interview now. I think my viewers got a good understanding about what you guys have been through and how you were treated when you came back to the United States as well. Veterans were not highly thought of at that time. Now, a lot of things have changed. People of my generation respect anyone who had been to Vietnam, end of. Because hell, that was a war that no one really wanted to be in. Going back to your childhood, you're very driven, you're very motivated. Where does that come from?
It comes from my mom and my faith in Catholicism. God knows that the Catholic Church has enormous problems these days and has for quite some time. But I don't look at kind of like the Pope and the rest of the guys that are calling the shots. I'm talking about the scripture and about the lineage from the time of Christ to St. Peter and that 2,000-year lineage. And it's just the dogma. That's where I immerse myself. I've always had this, to have faith is actually a blessing, to have faith. And then my Boudica mother, half English, her dad was from Kent, England.
Yeah.
Her love for America and her message of perseverance and Winston Churchill's speech, never give up. I think that when he said that, I think in 1940 or 41 at Harrow, where you just don't ever give up. And so perseverance, faith, you have to have some support from some icon in your family, a really close friend or a parent. And then I had my buddy Rick Beach and John Malai and a couple other folks that never really lost faith. And, after, year after year after year, I mean, most of the people thought that I was completely mad. And the thing that really hurt was, well, you're just not qualified. You don't rise to the level of what they want. And that was just so painful. But I'm of the school of that this thing about excuses and about people of color not having the equal opportunity of, say, my Caucasian brothers and sisters. Well, there was a lot of truth to that, certainly back in America's original sin with slavery and what have you, and then Reconstruction. But that's not today's America. I mean, America had a Black president, not once, twice. There's Afro-Americans on the Supreme Court, federal judgeships, appellate courts, attorneys, physicians, multimillionaire athletes, talk show hosts like Oprah's a billionaire. There is more opportunity here in the United States, bar none. So if you truly in your heart persevere and continue and you want something bad enough, this is the best game in town. I don't care. I don't give a damn what anybody says. And I'm talking from not reading a bunch of books. I'm talking about actually walking the walk and going through that series of crucibles, that in your heart, you're willing to work harder than the competition, you're going to make it. And that's established. Are there still some problems as to the old kind of Selma, Alabama, 1960 and 1950s and 40s? It's in my personal experience, I think that it is so insignificant these days. And like I said, I'm just going from my personal experience, and I've been all through the United States, and I've been around the world twice. And I think we've actually sauced all that stuff out about as good as it's going to be. And I'm very proud about that. It's wonderful. This is the greatest historical superpower going back to the Greeks. And that's, like I said, it's the best game in town.
Certainly is. And I'm proud to be a little part of that in the past as well. Right, Al, on this one, we will bring part two, which is your incredible story of what you achieved and went through in the LAPD as well. But that will be in a part two in a week or so, and my viewers will be very interested in that. I'm going to close the interview down in a minute or so. Again, thank you for sharing your experiences. You've been there. You've literally been there. You've got the t-shirt. You've talked the talk and you've walked the walk. Okay. Not many people can say they've done what you've done. We've only given some people a little inkling into your life before you joined the LAPD as well, which is just as amazing what you did in there than what you did in Vietnam as well. To me, it is an absolute honor to be able to speak to you, Al, call you a friend, and to have you on the show as well. Okay, so that's from a veteran to a combat veteran as well. Would you like to say anything else before I close the interview?
Well, I just think that you know, my story is a documented story that that regardless of who you are or where you're at, if you're willing to actually work harder than the competition, you can do it. It's just and like I said, it's when I hear these other folks, you know, screaming and crying and want to free everything, so it just kind of drives me crazy. So and in closing, I just, you know, I want to say that you know, thank you so much for having me on your show and giving me the opportunity to share my story. And I hope that other folks can look at that and draw from it, and when they go through their crucibles, they can walk through that fire and realize their dreams.
Al, thank you so much. You are an inspiration to a lot of people, and I know my viewers will be quite honoured to hear this interview and your stories and part two as well. Okay, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, hope you've enjoyed this interview. It's been emotional. It's been informative. It's also important. I hope everyone has learned something from what Al has been through as well. Catch you on part two of this interview. Take care, everybody. Stay safe. Catch you on the next show. Goodbye.
Bye-bye, Anth.